stand up in Toastmasters as well. So he's been an active Toastmaster for a year now. He is going to do the book review part of it today. He has selected the management book, The Ride of a Lifetime by Robert. Timer, please note the time is 5 to 7 minutes. Over to Toastmaster John for his management book review.
Thank you, Toastmaster Jayanti. Hope I'm audible and visible.
Yes, you're audible.
So very good morning to everyone. I know it's a bit too early. I haven't woken up at this time for like 5 months now. So it was a bit of a challenge, but I hope everybody is up and about. So like TM Jayanti was talking about, today I'm going to be reviewing The Ride of a Lifetime. So this is a book by, this is an autobiography by Robert Iger. So Robert Iger is the CEO of Walt Disney. He was the CEO for about 15 years. And in this book, he tries to share the experiences or lessons, or as he has mentioned, the ride of a lifetime that he wants to call, about 15 years that he has spent at the helm of the company. So this book was released in October 2019, so it's a bit recent. And something more relevant is Bob actually stepped down as the CEO of Walt Disney in February 2020. So it's just before the pandemic started that he stepped down and gave over the reins to his predecessor. So this book is predominantly, like I was saying, it's an autobiography. And this is where he talks about how he was able to bring the company to greater heights. So in his time, in 2005 to 2020, he was able to, let's say, grow the company 5 times. So when he took over the company, the market capitalization was about $50 billion. And he goes on to grow the company by $250 billion. Now that's not something which is normal in the corporate world when you want to grow a company 5 times, but he was able to achieve that. And in that span, he was also able to achieve quite legendary deals. Now, I'm sure we all would recognize names like Pixar. We would recognize names like Marvel, Lucasfilms, which is of the Star Wars, and 21st Century Fox. Now, all these big major brands that you just heard is part of Walt Disney. And it was only because of Bob Iger that all these brands became part of this legendary company that Disney is. Now, he writes this book predominantly to tell us, as he states in the book, it's lessons to creative leadership. I'll just quickly share the slide. Let me know if it's okay. Is it possible for me to share my PPT? I think the host is disabled. If someone can enable that for me.
Yeah, I may do the co-host.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Hope you can see the presentation. Let me know if you're not able to do so.
We can see that, John. Please go.
Great, thank you. So as he mentions in the front page of this book, this is predominantly lessons in creative leadership that he wants to share about. So then I would like to go on to the first incident. So right at the very start of the book, or the prologue of the book, he goes on to describe a very emotional situation. So he describes 2 scenarios. And actually, I would like to, in fact, read a small portion out of the book so that you understand what I'm talking about. But before I go there, I would like to give you the context in which the paragraph is. So the incident actually happens in Shanghai. He is in Shanghai, China, to launch the Disney Shanghai. This was a theme park. So Disney World, as we know, is there all over the globe, and it's owned by Walt Disney. And this one, the Shanghai Disney, was actually going to be launched in 2006. This is after 18 years. So from the time that the idea was conceived to the day of inauguration, it took about 18 years. So you can imagine the amount of dedication and work that went in. And this was a big launch from a company perspective because they are invested close to $6 billion in setting up this. So on the penultimate day, or a couple of days before the actual launch itself, as Bob and his team is there in Shanghai, he comes to know about 2 incidents. One is the Orlando shootout, which happened, which actually resulted in one of his employees being martyred. And the other incident was with one which happened in one of his resorts in California. So what happened was an young boy and his family who were enjoying their time in the resort. Unfortunately, a young boy was attacked by an alligator from a pond and he lost his life. So these two incidents happened on the previous day that they were supposed to launch the Shanghai Disney World. So I'll just read a portion. This is where he actually spoke to the family of the little boy who lost his life. And also he was handling media related reports in terms of the shootout. And after that, he walks on the stage, the greatest stage that Disney had ever been put on, to launch the Shanghai Disney. So this small portion starts like this. It is true, it was a happy day. And I needed to try to focus on that and recognize what it meant for all the people who had worked so hard for so long to make this day happen. And for the people of China who would have had this place to dream about in the same way that I and so many American kids dreamt of going to Disneyland. It was a happy day. It was also the saddest day of my career. Now, he was a man who was put 15 years as a CEO, and he says, it was a happy day, but it was also the saddest day of my career. Now, why I read this portion out to you is because right at the start, he speaks about this incident which hit him really hard, which is the hardest challenge that he had to face as a CEO. But what we really understand from this is compartmentalization. So here he's able to keep that grieving news within himself. He's also personally affected by it. But then he goes on to launch one of the biggest Disney World parks in the world. So here he's predominantly trying to communicate how to compartmentalize our own feelings. So it could be personal life, it could be professional life, but he says compartmentalize, handle it separately, and then you can continue to go ahead. Moving on, he predominantly bases this book on few principles, or he likes to impart values. So he is listed on 10 values right in the beginning of the book. And then he goes on to describe various experiences that he had, which relate back to quite a few of these points or principles that you see on the screen right now. Now, he quotes many examples. I would not like to go into each one of them, but the one which really connected with me was where he talked about authenticity. So I think authenticity is something that we even Toastmasters can connect. Whenever we give an evaluation, we try to make it as authentic because that's when the evaluation really counts. And he also, pardon me, he also goes on to say an experience where he as much as possible tries to be authentic with everyone he meets. So he's more of a people person. And that's being constantly quoted throughout the book. Stop sharing. Okay. So then he talks about a lot of other experiences that he had in terms of bringing the various big brands into the company and how he was able to go about that. Now, why I spoke about authenticity is because in each one of his deals, so the one with Pixar was actually with Steve Jobs. Pixar was owned by Steve Jobs and his team back then. And there was also the other one which was owned by Marvel. So in each one of these deals, what really stands out and what he wants us to take away is that this is a deal that's not between two companies, it's not between two entities or between two corporates, it's actually between two people. So he makes that very evident, the way he was able to develop leadership with either Steve Jobs, or in fact, if it was with Lucasfilms, it was for George Lucas. So each one, he built a rapport. He made sure that people at that highest level were able to connect and develop a relationship and then bring the company on board. And he also made sure it was not just one big company gobbling up a smaller company. He says it's all about giving the values that both companies have to come together. I believe that's my 5 minutes thing. I'll wrap it up in a minute. Thank you. So then what's the not so nice parts, if I may say? Now, the title of the book says Lessons in Creative Leadership. So when you give a title like that, you're pretty much pulled in saying, okay, I'm going to learn something which is out of my area, because it's something, lessons in creative leadership seems to be quite attractive. So that is where I felt the book was lacking. Even though it is autobiography, you can't change your life story. But since he mentioned its lessons in creative leadership, I found there was not too many creative leadership lessons. It was lessons in general leadership where he speaks predominantly about values and how you can nurture and bring them up. So, and there's also the other portion where he doesn't talk more about his personal life, because we are not really sure whether his work-life balance took a hit because of being so closely committed to leading a company. Now, all in all, I would say this is a really nice read. I've read quite a few autobiographies and I also keep reading biographies. And if I had to give a verdict on this book, I would say this would be on a scale of 1 to 5, a 3.5. It's a good book. Is it a good book to have in your collection? I would say yes. But would you read it a second time? I'm not sure. That I leave it to you guys. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster John. I rarely read books gently, but after listening to John's speech, I feel motivated to grab that book and read it. Thank you so much, Toastmaster John. And I know all of you are waiting